John Maxwell once said, "The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the leader adjusts the sails." How are you at adjusting your sails? Let's have ourselves a pocket-sized pep talk, and we'll speak with a man who I'm quite sure will be able to offer some help.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Patrick Freudiger, works as an executive coach and sparring partner for CIOs, helping executives and their teams to improve their leadership behavior. After more than 25 years in leadership positions, he recently wrote the book, The Phoenix Principle. It's based on personal interviews with more than 100 top executives. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Rob. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Well, welcome aboard. And I want everyone to know Patrick's staying up late for this one because we're speaking to him from Switzerland. And it's a little bit later there because I'm starting a little bit later here. So he's got his, what are you drinking there? Coffee, tea? What do you got in front of you? It looked hot.
Coffee to keep me awake.
He's having a 10 p.m. coffee. So already we should admire him.
Yeah.
I met you in 2013, I believe it was, and you were still with Valiant at the time. Beautiful city of Bern. I'll actually never forget that city. Absolutely beautiful. And you founded that in 2007. And in 1998, you built a company and you were a managing partner. You worked on, from what I read, at least 80 projects. You then worked for AMAG Automobile, and you can tell us a little bit more about that. But in 2016, you were named top CIO in Switzerland for your work. I remember you sending me something about that. Very impressive. So you got a lot going there, my friend. How would you describe your career? And I know I left some pieces out, but do it in 2 or 3 sentences for me so we can get people up to speed on you.
Okay. Well, now I'm kind of like 56. So my career is spans like a little bit over 30 years. And I started out as a researcher at the university at the Institute of Marketing and Strategic Leadership. And then I transformed into the role of a business consultant right out of the gate. I founded a company with 2 colleagues. Just for the fun of it. And we tried to be successful, and we managed that quite well. But after 10 years, we split up, and I started with another company that is called Valiant. That's the one where we met together, and there was always this crucial thing about selling, being able to sell your services, and that's why we crossed our paths. Because you, as I guess everyone that's listening to the podcast knows, you wrote one of a heck of a good sales book, one of the best I ever read with the customer-centered selling. And that's why we invited you to Switzerland. Okay. And then the success study continued, and I got a wonderful opportunity with AMAG. AMAG is actually Volkswagen in Switzerland. They do all the financing, selling, repairing of all the Volkswagen car, which is Audi, Seat, Skoda, Porsche, and of course Volkswagen itself. So it's roughly every third car in Switzerland is coming from Volkswagen. And then the CEO then of AMAG told me, hey, what about if you tried once to see if your PowerPoint slides that you craft so well actually work in practice? So I took that chance, and I tried it out, and it worked quite well, which led to this award in 2016. So in short terms, what I did during my career, I always had the courage to, when I was successful, to try something else. That was kind of always the moment where I jumped into a new business venture and I said, the thing that I'm doing it quite successful. So why not try something different?
Yeah, the true heart of an entrepreneur, really. And I think that's one of the reasons why, Patrick and I worked together 8 years ago, and yet we've maintained this a friendship. And I think one of the reasons why we've maintained it is that, well, one, we both have a passion for selling, but I think we also have a passion for looking at things and trying to do it differently and trying to do it in a creative way and trying to say it a different way and work on it a different way. So it doesn't surprise me that, you got into consulting. I want to talk about this book in a minute because that one surprised me a little bit. Yeah. All of a sudden, here comes COVID, and it derails a lot of businesses. And I can tell you that for me as a professional speaker, remember, I do this full time. I had to move to virtual. I had to really kind of change and rework what I was doing. Tell me about you. Tell me how this COVID crisis has affected you.
Well, actually, COVID affected me in three ways. First of all, it was a super bad timing to start a new business, and starting a business which is called behavior-based leadership coaching for executives. That was, I think, the baddest timing you can imagine, because when you're in the middle of a pandemic, you're in the middle of a crisis, you have all kind of things going on as a CEO, but not to get some improvement in your leadership style. So that was tough. And also, when I looked at my financial statement, I said, "Wow, that was like I earned as little as 25 years ago." On the other hand, and that is kind of like another story. All the money I made all over these years when I sold companies and everything, I always did something which I would call is walk the talk. I was, as you know, working as a CIO, which means I know a lot about tech stuff. And so I always invested all my money into tech stuff. So that actually kind of exploded my portfolio during COVID, which means at like 56, I always have kind of like my financial freedom. So that led to the third way that affected me, and that was writing the book. So I actually had the financial freedom to start writing this book, and that was also something. It wouldn't have been possible without COVID, because you imagine I reached out to all these C-level from big international and Swiss companies to ask them for an interview that lasted at least 60 minutes. And a lot of them said yes. And I never met them before in my life. And we just met in the virtual space, which is, at least in Switzerland, would be absolutely unimaginable that you can meet a C-level for the first time in just a virtual space. Normally you would have to drive up there and meet them in person. So that was kind of like fantastic. And I wrote the book during the time that I normally would visit my clients.
Right. So you used your time wisely. I want to throw a sales tactic back at you just for the next time. Okay. And that is, and it's a wonderful little piece that somebody taught me. It may have been my dad, but it was a long time ago. I believe I was still selling life insurance, so I had to be in my early 20s. But I remember something bad was going on. And he said, and I said, why would I walk in at that point? It's probably the worst time I could walk in. And the person said, just remember this phrase, just tell them, no matter what they say, that's why I'm here. So if they say, well, but business is really bad and we're really not doing much, well, that's why I'm here. And sort of use that as a transition. And if he says, if you walk into the next office and they say, we've got more business we know what to do with, Well, that's why I'm here. And then off you go again.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So it is, I will tell you, during the pandemic for me, with a bunch of companies that budgets were cut and we're not really traveling. And the one thing we're not going to be doing is training. Well, that's why I'm here. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. And I actually used that a lot over the last year and a half. And it's tried and true. I learned it 40 years ago, and it still works nicely. But so factor that one out. That's today's lesson from I should have tucked that one in 8 years ago for you. But all right, let's let's stay on that book now. All right, so I mentor a lot of authors, and I liked your story about this book and this timing, because a lot of times when people ask me, "Gee, when do you know?" and I say, a book tends to find you. You don't find the book. And that's what I think is sort of happened. So tell me about, I know that you found the time to write the book. Give me in your gut, in your heart, why you wrote the book. Because I know it's a leadership book. So tell me about that.
It's a leadership book. And the longer my career lasted, the more I got this feeling that actually what differentiates the very successful leaders and the mediocre leaders is their behavior. It's all about leadership behavior. It's not so much about knowledge. Knowledge you can acquire, you can learn, and it's kind of like a prerequisite. But when we had our first company, we were terrible leaders. I was just coming out of my military service. I was a young lieutenant, and so I was kind of like yelling out the orders to my young consultants. Even 25 years ago, that worked so. So we had to improve, and the more we improved, the better the results got, and the more we start to value people, to recognize them, to give them awareness, and to say thank you, to preach them for the good things they do for you, the more we were successful. And the bigger the company is, and that's the experience I made at Volkswagen, the more impact you have as a leader with your behavior. So this constant challenge to find your personal leadership style, which means kind of like to be authentic, which means walk the talk, do as you preach, things like that, which is quite hard on a day-to-day basis. So that was kind of like the fascinating point about that. And I have a lot of colleagues and also friends with our mid-50s, and actually they are in a leadership position, but they don't like their job anymore because they find leadership is quite painful. You have this generational gap, young people with completely different value systems. So I had a lot of conversations with colleagues, and they told me, if it wasn't for the money, I would just quit. More or less, I hate what I do. But I got an ex-wife, I got a girlfriend, and I got 2 kids at university. So I just need the money. And that is a terrible situation to be in. So I wrote the book actually for those people. And there is a story within the book from a guy which is called Jörg, which actually it describes in the book that the situation he's in, that he's completely unhappy, everything gets out of balance, and then he's kind of like reinvent himself. That's why it's called the Phoenix Principle, huh? Yeah. This Greek mythology bird that dies and then rises again. There's also a second reason, and the second reason is I screwed up my first book. My first book should be my PhD. I should have gotten my thesis out a long time ago when I worked at university. And actually, I had already 200 pages written and everything, but I had this idea in my head to start a company with 2 former colleagues then from university, and there was this strategic window of opportunity. I think I'll have to jump in there, and I finished this thesis later, but that never happened. So
Well, I like the first one better than the second one, but
yeah.
Okay. You know what I really, what impressed me about your response, Patrick, is your attention to authenticity. I really think that since we met, it's something that I've really taken much more seriously now. I think that we work on, a lot of times telling people what to say. We don't tell them how to say it. We don't really get into the authentic part. Even, I mean, I'm the sales guy on this call, but even in selling, one of the things that's very important to me is I don't want to get near selling till we actually allow people to understand how their individual style fits into all these behaviors, whether it's leadership or selling, or I don't care if you're an accountant. We all have our own style. And the further we move from that style, the less authentic we are and the less successful we are. So I like the fact that that seemed to wake you up. It seemed to call at you. So let's stay there a little bit. The book is called The Phoenix Principle. I have my copy right here. Okay.
Great.
I'd love to tell you that I've read my copy, but you don't have an English version yet.
Yeah,
So
not yet.
I'm getting it. Okay. All right. But it's my favorite book I haven't read yet, but I got the author with me today, so I get to hear about it. So we got a hint from this one person who sort of inspired, but tell me, in a minute or two or less, this is your elevator pitch. What exactly is the Phoenix Principle?
The subtitle the subtitle has to do something with excellence in leadership. So it's this thought, this idea in your head to get better every day a little bit, to improve yourself, to have kind of like a growth mindset. And so that idea of consistently growing and getting better, that is applied to leadership.
Okay.
So it starts, the Phoenix Principle is actually a model and a process. When we start with the model, it's a model that consists of 10 elements. And 5 of those elements describe the roles that you have as a leader. Always with the objective to be as authentic as you can. So you have the role of developing your employees. That's one role you have as a leader, to think about their personal careers and to help them develop, find out their strengths, their superpowers, and try to help them to move along. Then you have a second role, and the second role is all about supporting your teams. So this role, leader as a facilitator, where you help your teams achieve their goals, their objectives, mainly that you use your position to help them to move obstacles and to facilitate the way for them. And then you have a third role as a leader, and that's the role to align the organization to different market settings or different strategy settings. Sometimes you have to downsize, sometimes you have to build up, you have to realign the organization. You have this this hype about agility, to be agile as an organization. That's this kind of role, right. to make the organization that it can, in a way that it can adapt easy to change. And the fourth role is the role as a visionary. I mean, looking to the US, you have some fantastic visionaries, thinking of Elon Musk, thinking of Steve Jobs, and those super visionary people with a bold vision to dent the universe, to make real difference. And also on a small scale, you have to fill out this role to energize people, to give them a reason to come early in the morning to the office full of energy, That's what you're doing when you're creating a vision that is appealing to your employees. So you have those 4 roles, and then you have this core competence of communication. Those roles, you lift them out by communicating. So you have to be a good communicator as a leader.
Right.
So you can try to define that in the way that you say, okay, how am I authentic in those 4 roles, and how am I authentic when I communicate? And if you see that there is a gap to where you want to be and where you are, then you have the 5 other elements, which consists of going inside your head and starting to reflect yourself, to look if you have a belief system that limits you, if you have values that that creates conflict, if you have an attitude problem. For some people, the glass is always half empty.
Right.
And for other ones, it's always half full. So you have to challenge yourself. And also core experiences you made during your career, that also has a big impact. And what I show with these elements is that you can actually reinvent yourself. You have this method from Anthony Robbins, which is, I don't know, it's in English, it's called neuroassociative conditioning, something like that, where you can actually give you a new set of rules in your head. So you work in a different way on a new operating system. And then, of course, when it changes your habits, that's the last element, your habits, then you live out your roles in a different way. So then you have a process, like a little bit, I'm a process guy as you are, Rob. So there's a 5-step process how you reinvent yourself.
Okay, now I'm going to want to hear about that process. And by the way, I was taking notes while you're talking, going, there better be a process here. I better find a process out of this, man. So I'm going to want to hear about that. I did want to just share with you that, when I was 11 years old, my dad was our scoutmaster, and he was really one of the greatest leaders I ever saw. But this little troop of 7 boys became 120 boys within 2 years. But he actually made a patch and that we wore on our Boy Scout uniforms. I don't know how we did it. I didn't think we were allowed to make our own patches, but we did. It went on our shoulder, and it said, "Don't go on and do it. Come on, let's do it." And it was a shout out to a leadership principle that he was imparting on 11, 12, 13-year-old boys. And I remember being very proud, seeing other people look at that patch, and we lived that patch. And so everybody was, in a sense, being trained as leaders. But so to me, hearing you break that down it not only impresses me, but and I'm going to insert one of my own words. I like the fact, without using the word, and you can tell me, Rob, not really, you got that one wrong, but it sounds like there's an element of inspiration in there, that a leader, listen, we're going to get you to go from point A to point B, but my job is to inspire that move. If you think about it, it's almost the litmus test for leaders. Who were your bad managers? I'm not naming any names. I only had one, but I can tell you right now, not an inspirational person. Okay. There was no, come on, let's do it. It was get over there and get it done. So I like that part, that, what I'm hearing you within that there's an element of inspiration. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got that right. And you see, what is fantastic about this job of coaching people in leadership behavior is the story you just mentioned from your dad, which is a super nice story. It's 50 years ago, and you still have it as a core experience in your heart. Yes. And you can still use it as something that inspires you. Yeah. Half a century later. Yeah. That's the power of good leadership.
Yeah.
So
really good point. Yeah. I wish you hadn't outed the 50 years, but yes, it's been a while.
Yeah.
All right. You were now going to get into the process side of this Phoenix principle. So let's hear you. This is the trick for you on a podcast. Let's hear that process and see if you can get that out to us in a minute or two. Okay.
Okay.
So floor is yours.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
So the first step is actually that you develop your personal leadership style. You take those different roles and you think about the core activities in those roles and how you want to fulfill them, being authentic with your personality. Then the second step is you have to look in the mirror and you have to see the person that looks back, which means you do the best way to do it is a 360 leadership assessment, so that you ask your boss, your peers, your employees, maybe your colleagues, your friends, your wife, or your husband, whatever, and ask them for feedback.
So often when we seek feedback, people who are either untrained or don't know think that, oh, you want me to tell you 5 things that I didn't like, 10 things that I didn't like about what you just did. And it's just, not only is it psychologically valuable, emotionally valuable, but it's actually productive and valuable to get balanced feedback. Tell me a few things I'm doing well. There's a good chance I don't know I'm even doing them. Tell me, I don't need 10. Tell me 2 or 3 of the biggest things that you suggest that I could learn so that I can implement and come up with an idea to actually fix this thing. But it's not enough just to ask for feedback. And I like the way you couch that of kind of both sides of that spectrum. Back to you.
And the super hard part in this second step is the more successful you are doing your career, the less you actually are open to feedback, because you look back on your successes and you see your behavior and then you conclude, oh, I'm successful because of my behavior. But you can be successful in spite of having a bad behavior. There's a correlation, but not a causality. So the higher you are also in leadership position, the harder is it actually to get real feedback. That's why I sometimes include husbands and wives, because normally they give it straight to you.
Well, is it harder because people feel intimidated to give you feedback because you're at that level? Or is it harder because that person at that level doesn't want the feedback?
It's an easy one. No, you have nothing to gain as an employee to criticize your boss.
Oh, okay. So
that's
not the boss that's rejecting it. I got it.
Because if the boss takes it well, fair enough. But if he doesn't, well, then you run into the risk to repercussions. So whatever that.
I asked you that question because I was almost going to take you to task on this. Was an area we were going to disagree on. We're not now. But what I found, not average, and that's not necessarily just for leadership people, but successful people, truly successful people, are usually very interested in feedback. That's how they got successful. So, and what you're hearing, I think it's interesting to hear it from your perspective, Patrick, is that here we have successful people who are successful typically for a reason, because they're always trying to improve. They're always looking for anything they can learn from. And unfortunately, here we are, the lower level people going, I don't want to upset the boss. So I go back to, I think if we balance our feedback to this individual, not only will that individual be happy, but we might be a little safer. Maybe. Your thoughts. You're the author.
Well, during those roughly 100 interviews, I asked those top executives to give them a rating between 1 and 10 for their leadership behavior. And if it was not a 10, I asked them, what would be the difference? What could you make that you give yourself a 10? And the fascinating thing was probably the first person to ask directly that question to them for about 20 years. So they were kind of like surprised. Well, I have to rate myself. Yeah.
Of that 100, did anybody say I'm a 10?
Yeah, of course.
Not
much. Yeah.
Okay.
That was one finding. Normally, the average was between a 7 and an 8.
Okay.
fascinating was that female leaders, they rate themselves like 2 points lower on a scale from 1 to 10 on average. They're more critical to themselves.
All right. There were a couple more behaviors, and we'll begin to wrap up because I had to jump in on that feedback.
Yeah.
So let you finish up on those process moves.
Okay, and the process quickly. Then once you got the feedback, you decide which leadership behavior you want to improve. Normally, you take 1 or 2 behaviors. That is already hard. And then you start a process where you actually turn to your employees and say, hello, guys. My name is Rob. No, my name is Patrick. I wanna improve my leadership behavior, and it's all about delegation. I had this feedback that I'm not doing this right, so I need your ideas how I can improve. So you take the ideas from your employees, you write them down, you build an action plan, you try to do this for a month. You go again to your employees for kind of like a feed forward, not a feedback. You get new ideas, you try them out for a month, and so you're constantly improving. And every quarter, you ask them for a feedback. Did I improve? Yes or no, and by how much? So if you're disciplined enough to do this for, let's say, between 6 and 12 months, then you actually are able to change your behavior, because those new habits will form, this new behavior will become habits. So you can do them unconsciously.
You know, we can entertain, we can inspire, we can motivate people, but I love when somebody like you comes forward with a real process and not only lays it out there, but then begins to lay into that process the same philosophy, meaning I'm really happy that you might enjoy this read. Now, how are you going to implement what you just read? And, you know, what are your next steps? So I think that's cool that that's part of your process.
Yeah, and also in the book, you find a bunch of checklists and kind of everything you need actually to do it. That's
excellent. Yeah. All right. Well, now speaking of feedback, the book's been out for how long now?
Since mid-August.
Okay. So what kind of feedback you getting?
Feedback is fantastic. It's kind of like overwhelming. I actually, because what I did, I mean, it's also a little bit the marketing gag, huh? Interviewing 100 top executives because they all get a book and the visit from me for free. But actually, you had already a bunch of them really reading the book, and coming up with a surprising good feedback saying, hey, it's a book about leadership. But actually, it was quite entertaining. The story about Jörg, in some ways, I recognize myself. So that is fantastic. And even my professor at university, which is now 82 years old, he did a post on LinkedIn how much he liked the book. And he said, Mr. Freudiger should have turned up with his PhD thesis 30 years ago. Now he sends me a book.
That's funny. He remembers.
That's really funny. Yeah, okay. Of course.
Now I've got a collector's item as far as I'm concerned. Okay. When do I get my English version so I can read it? Is your publisher actively seeking out an American version?
My publisher, Wiley, is actually an American company. So I signed a typical American contract. So I think I don't have any intellectual property rights anymore on the book. But so no clue. But I think if it sells well, then of course they will do an English version.
Good. And I'll try and put a good word in for you because Wiley's one of my publishers too. So I know the people at Wiley. We'll see if we can't get an English version going here. Now, last question, because I want people to be able to get a hold of you. And so maybe it's not the book, maybe it's consulting, maybe it's coaching. How do they, how would somebody get a hold of you?
The simplest way is to seek out for me on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. It's Patrick with CK Freudiger.
Spell that Freudiger.
That's Freudiger. Good. Freudiger. And then they'll find me. And of course, there's also the website, www.freudiger.coach. where they can find me. And also, if they just Google the name, because I won this award in 2016, there's still a lot of praise and a lot of pictures out there. So they'll stumble over me. That's
all right. Yeah. You weaseled that award back into the podcast. I'm impressed with you. Wasn't once enough. Do you have to rub it into me? Okay. No, that's something to be really proud of. And I do remember we probably hadn't spoken in a year or so, and I got something from LinkedIn on you going, "Hey, Rob, take a look." So it's something to be very proud of. Yeah.
Just one thing, the idea actually of using the book as a marketing instrument, that was you that planted that in my head, like 8 years ago. I never forgot about it. I just had kind of like, as you said, the book finds you. I had to find the time to do it.
Right.
But so you can take credit for that one as well.
And credit I will. We'll call this podcast Rob Jollis and some other guy. No, I can't take that much credit. Well, I have to tell you, and I hope you understand, I say this from my heart. I'm proud of you. I speak to a lot of people, as you will now, as you're now part of the author club, who are going to tell you, I've got this dream, I want to do it, and I'm thinking about doing it. And the first thing we're going to do is welcome them with open arms. And then what we're going to do is, figuratively speaking, hand them a shovel and say, there's wanting it. And then there's taking this shovel and digging that hole, putting one word after another, right? And you did it. You did it. You got the book written.
Absolutely. I have to say, I'm also a little bit proud of me, but it's kind of like, yeah, well, it's like with every, it was kind of like also a little bit COVID, with every crisis, when you look at it with the right attitude, something positive comes out of it.
And that's a great attitude to have. And, I'm looking at my adopted dog right behind me. The shelters here in the U.S. are doing very well now. There's a lot of dogs and cat strays got adopted during the pandemic. So there are different stories. And one story that I think is really beautiful about you is you took that opportunity and said, okay, so this part of the business is going that way. I'm going to pursue this part of the dream. I think it'd be a shame if none of us didn't know what was the duration of this and how, but if we could all go back, it would have been a nice time to do something like that. You read my blog articles from time to time. I wrote a blog article I'm very proud of called It's Shelf Building Time. And I wrote that a year ago, March. So right when the pandemic was starting, about my dad, who would, when things were slow, he'd come home and he'd build shelves. Yeah. And it got his mind going, and it got him off of what was going there and made him more productive. And then he was ready to attack the world again. So I think that was your shelf building. You got yourself a book.
Absolutely.
And congratulations to you. It's been a thrill just talking to you again, because we've exchanged LinkedIn's here and there, but we really haven't gotten on screen. So I'm thrilled to have caught up with you. And I hope my audience is as happy as I am in terms of just hearing from an old friend who did good. You did good, Patrick. You're in the club, my man. Now, I don't want to, I got to tell you, one guy told me one time, he said, when you write a book, you're an author. When you write two, you're a writer. So, the Writer Club is right around the corner for you, but we'll hold a seat for you. Anyway, thank you so much for being on the show. Been an absolute pleasure. And
well, the pressure is absolutely mine. It was fantastic opportunity for me, even it's a little bit late in the evening, but still fantastic. Thank you so much, Rob. I'm really very grateful.
Well, I'm grateful to have you as a friend. And I'm grateful for that cup of coffee, because you sounded like it was right in the middle of the day there. You did great. Folks, we'll do it again, and we'll keep working and bringing you some great content like what you heard with Patrick. And stay safe, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.